Later, I guess.
Good on him. All right, there we go. I pressed the live button and we are live. Welcome. All right.
Good to be here with you. We'll give this a shot.
Yeah, well, I've used, like I said before, I used YouTube Live before to record stuff, but this is exciting because we're actually letting the world know here that we're live. So we'll see if anybody decides to join in our conversation.
That's right. We probably won't be overwhelmed with too many folks, but I've definitely found that the power there's a lot of power in the asynchronous. Hard to get people together synchronously at the same time, but a lot easier to have people download things after the fact. So
yeah, no kidding, it absolutely is. And it kind of leads into one of the things that I saw you talk about today. I was doing a little bit of my research and I was watching a couple of your YouTube videos, and one that I liked, one that was really cool, I thought, 2014 looks like, where you were trying to light a log with a spark.
Yes.
But that was what a wonderful metaphor. And then one of the sort of pieces that you went into was this idea of opening things up with our thoughts and our reflections, and from whether it be our students or our teachers and whatnot. And you and I both mentioned before we started that podcasting has been sort of one of our more favorite mediums. And what I'm finding is even if the audience isn't huge, it's really nice to take these reflections that used to sit on my lesson plan or my notebook, and now they're sort of out in the world, and you can get a chance to have people reflect and have people think a bit about, what it is you're saying.
Absolutely. I think that was probably the keynote I put together for the K-12 online conference a couple of years ago. So it was igniting innovation, I think, is the theme. So yeah, right. We had the fire in the backyard, and we're thinking about ways that we spark innovation. And podcasting has been a huge part of my learning landscape since at least, I think, 2005, probably. That's when I first, that's when podcasting came into the mainstream lexicon and burst down to the scene. And I think now, I just saw a demo last week of the Google Now, what's it called? Google Assistant, Google Home. And, right. And Jason Neiffer, who I do the tech situation room with, literally said to it, hi Google, or whatever you say to trigger it, not hey Siri, play right. The latest episode of the EdTech Situation Room. So, being able to do that with your voice to an AI empowered device, because still getting it downloaded and subscribing and all that kind of stuff is a challenge. So it's a niche still, but I think podcasting is having a huge renaissance, evidently. What was it? What was the big one that was about the mystery that so many people listen? Serial, was it Serial?
Oh, right. Yeah. No, I forget the title too, but it was huge, right?
I didn't actually do that one, but people got really hooked on it. I know that I've really felt close to people who I've listened to for a long time with a podcast, because it just gives you a different texture and insight. And it's so much easier, right, to talk than to spend the time writing, which is not to say that writing is not good and important. It is, but it's a good medium.
It's really a different medium. I heard a lot of people tell me that they throw on my podcast or other podcasts when they're folding laundry, or I do it a lot when I'm driving to work. Like I can't read an article when I'm driving to work, right?
Oh yeah. In fact, I was talking to my wife about this. I think we are perhaps mostly blind to how biased we are to the text to the text info. I'm not saying this very well. We have a huge bias favoring text in school and in life, because that has been mostly what we had access to, even though we've had other kinds of media. And I find myself consuming far more long form literature, listening to Audible, consuming just a ton, even though my commute is much shorter than what it was for several years, just on podcasts. And I think that, and then speaking, I'm speaking to my device, inputting, my grocery list before I go shop at the grocery store now, because it's so much faster. So, I think it's interesting that, what schools value and what we tend to value as teachers, and then the affordances of new media for our consumption, but also our creation and production of ideas.
Right, and seeing the different place for the different things. I mean, I don't think either of us are saying that text doesn't have its time and its place, but why and how you're digesting different things is important to put into place, and who's doing it. I mean, just because I like to listen to podcasts and I think that audio is easier for me to understand, doesn't mean that's going to work for the next guy, right? And some of us are more global and big picture. Like I definitely like to sort of sit and absorb. I'm not the person that takes a lot of notes. I'm not the person that likes a step by step. I like to absorb, and because of that, podcasting makes a ton of sense for me from a learning perspective. If that wasn't the case, maybe that wouldn't be the right medium, but to allow me to have that choice is super important.
And I've heard some people recently say some things like, we need to have a no technology Wednesday, and let's just put away all of our tools. And
no technology Wednesdays. I mean, no pencils, no paper.
Well, yeah, right. Where do you draw the line? Is it 1895 or 1910? My wife teaches 3rd and 4th grade and has students at reading levels from kindergarten, 1st grade, all the way up to maybe 5th or 6th grade. And so many of those kids are able to use their one-to-one iPad. So they use highlighted text and ebooks that they can read to them, and they have an interest level that's far higher than their instructional level. So if you would tell them to do a technology-less Wednesday, then you're going to condemn some of these kids to the Spot and Jane books or that level of reading, versus the stuff that they're really interested in, they're jazzed about. And so I think that side of technology use, we're not fully appreciating the affordances that it brings to learners in all cases. And sometimes I think I don't know, it just depends who we hang out with, I guess. But sometimes I'm hanging out with folks that have kind of real chips on their shoulder with technology, who are really down on because of screen time and bullying, and there's all these negative sides of it. I want to say, hey, do you realize how many kids are, and adults too? I mean, my sister-in-law has been legally blind, but when she got her Kindle, she could make the text large enough where she could read. I mean, that was a revolution. She was audiobook only until that point. So those kinds of things, we can't overlook, because it's a big deal when suddenly, oh, look, I can read a book again, or I can experience a book and experience ideas that I didn't have access to before because, of my vision or my skills or whatever.
Well, why on earth would we choose to limit our tools, right? Like, I mean, plumbers don't have no wrench Wednesday.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah, right.
And if we think of it that way, and I can understand how you can get away from that, right? Because the reality is that tools can also be not tools. So me cruising Facebook, hard to argue that is a useful thing in the classroom, but that same device can certainly be used in a myriad of ways. If I'm taking a picture of the board so that I can have it for future times, if I'm using Siri to write for me, there's tons and tons of positive things. And so I think that we should be teaching to it. One of the examples I've been using a lot is just a little while ago, I went to the grocery store, and the clerk, teenager clerk, was texting while they were passing my groceries through, which probably I don't think it would be hard to put the argument out that that's not the sort of public behavior that you should be having when you're doing a job. But to me, instead of, say, banning them, these phones, or saying that it's a bad thing, shouldn't we be teaching it when that person was learning these skills? So that person's in grade 6, 7, or 8, and they had those conversations, and they learned about, this is the sort of time that you text, and this is the sort of time that you don't, and here's how you use your technology wisely instead of avoiding it entirely. I think would get to a better place.
Yeah, and that whole idea of teaching appropriate use and walking the line, equipping people to make the choices. If we are in a environment at school that is devoid of technology, we were having conversations about this today at school, actually, about digital citizenship, and then, we can lament, oh gosh, look, they just immediately, went to their devices. We're going to live in a world full of devices and full of access to information. So learning how to, judiciously and appropriately and thoughtfully, turn our screens on, turn our screens off. It's an important part of digital citizenship. So the other thing that came to my mind as you were sharing that is, I think that as humans, we want to put things in a box. We want to put people in a box. I've had this happen to me where people have seen me in the past as, oh, you're the fix the printer guy, or you're the tech guy, so that's what you do.
Right.
It's like, no, really, I think I'm a relationship guy, and I'm a teacher, and I use these technology tools. But these tools, there's a word I learned a while back called protean. I think there was some Greek or Roman god called Proteus or something, but it means, it can do a lot of different things. So with this smartphone, I can, text my wife, be in contact with my son in college, I could, waste a lot of time looking at Facebook. I could fill my mind with disinformation about our election or politics or whatever.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't fit into an easy box.
Right.
But sometimes people have significant experiences, or they've heard, probably outlier things, like in the case of negative technology, about bullying, about sexting, and with probably not just kids, it's adults too. But anyway, and then we want to put a label on this. So I don't know. That's part of the challenge too, is to say, this is protein. This is powerful. This can do so many different things. What are you choosing to do with it?
And then I was thinking, when you mentioned the Google Assistant thing, what's particular? So it's not a linear growth, and it's not done growing, right? Like I heard about this Google Assistant thing. What blew my mind is it has context, right? Like if I say, okay, call my friend Sam, and then I say, apparently, if I can then say, how old is he? I don't have to mention Sam again. It knows the context. I'm talking about Sam.
Right.
It's from there. Like that to me is crazy.
Sure, and that's where artificial intelligence is going. I mean, we have 3 kids, and our younger daughters have on car trips, taken Siri and really tried to get a conversation going. Well, you really couldn't do that with that version of Siri, but that is where AI is going. And yeah, I mean, that's a really intriguing thing. I mean, Google in their October event said, we see AI as the new search. This is Google saying this, that
Right.
Search, which has been their number one biggest transformational thing, they see AI and then the personal assistant as being the next big thing. And it's not, I don't think they're saying it in a cavalier, not with a lot of deep thought way. I mean, so I don't even know that we know what does that mean. It probably means the availability of an AI is going to become more normalized in our lives. And that's going to go far beyond me being able to say, hey Google, hey Siri, what's the weather today? And yeah, so where does that go when you've got access to a computer algorithm that can carry on a threaded conversation that's not just a one-off, look this up or tell me what this fact is.
Right. And this is this piece about the fluidity of technology. Like that's one of the things about technology that's so interesting right now, is that it's completely fluid. And I gotta give credit to this person. I gotta find out who said it. I forget. Who was asked, well, what's the most important tech skill? What's the most important thing you want teachers and students to know moving forward with regards to technology? And the answer was the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn is going to be the person who's pushing boundaries and moving forward in the future. Mm-hmm. Like this idea that there is a knowledge, there's some vessel holding a piece of knowledge, and you have to get it is kind of a little bit antiquated. Like things are changing so quickly that it's your ability not to necessarily understand a program, but to understand how to understand a program. Like you mentioned on the way in that we were talking about YouTube Live and how the interface is always changing. That's kind of relatively new, right? It used to be that I would get Word 95 and I would have that for 5 years, and they would move the save button and it would freak me out, and I would figure out exactly how it looked now, and then they would change it for another 5 years. But now things are changing quick, and we as users need to figure out how to not let that bother us. And I think that sort of almost that metaphor plays into the classroom and how we're dealing with students, right?
Yeah, we have a digital citizenship team at school, and today was actually our mini retreat. So we took the morning to look at goals and activities that we've been brainstorming and researching, and we've done surveys and studies, and we had a video conference chat with another educator over in North Carolina. Anyway, one of the things that emerged from this is, we can identify the curriculum and we can identify the activities, but how are we going to carve out time, not just about digital citizenship, but about other things too, whether you call it sharpening the saw or just regular professional development. What do you do in your context? Tell me a little bit about your teaching situation, and what do you see as the ideal for teachers in having time built in the schedule to learn and to listen to each other and have time for that?
Yeah, I think it's really important. So excuse me, I've just moved into a new school. So I'm the academic director at a new school, sort of 2 months in, and just sort of getting my feet wet in this place and getting things sorted out. But one of the things that I think is really important when it comes, especially to technology, is thinking about professional development in regards to like a just-in-time style support. and working a little bit with the local university, with Ottawa University right now, trying to pilot such a program. So one of the issues with things as they move is it's hard for me to predict what my teachers need throughout the year, right? And it used to be that we would get together and maybe we'd have some voices of stakeholders and set up, okay, well, the PD goal for this year is X, and we're going to meet these goals throughout the year on the PD days, and then we're going to go to these conferences, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't know what's going to happen in January. Like if I have a teacher that brings in a 3D printer and really needs 3D printing support, then probably I should be giving them that. But I don't know that 5 months in advance. So being fluid, if the idea is that I want teachers to be fluid in their understanding of tech, then those who are providing the professional development and or in collaboration with them providing professional development need to have that same fluidity, which I think is quite challenging.
Yeah.
But should be the goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think instructional coaching and having having some designated times when teachers can team and meet with an instructional coach, whether that's in a small group or then follow up one-on-one. I know there's some different schools that are doing that, and we're not at that point. It's something I've talked about and I'm wanting to encourage, and the whole issue of change and how that comes about. I think a lot of times, we'll see peer schools or other schools that we look up to and think, okay, we need to be, following their lead in some of the things they're doing. And so I'm very, very interested in that, because I just, sure, I can come up with a menu, and I need to do a little more of this for my teachers of things I'd love to share with them and ideas, but the best things are going to come from them, in
Right.
terms of their need and their interest, what they're studying, what they're doing, and then having a chance to be that coach or be that mentor, whatever you want to call it. But, being able to offer some ideas and some expertise, and then having some time where we can actually, work together in the classroom. And I think that's part of my vision of what I'd love to see at our school is some certified teachers who move over to more of a coaching role, but then administration recognizing the importance in the schedule, because that's where we set, basically a lot of our values are manifested through the schedule.
Right.
We're going to provide some time for you to team and for you to meet with this person. And
time is teacher currency, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, teachers are always not fighting. I mean, that's a bit rough, but there's definitely a relationship with time, and it's challenging to get it and to get a quality amount of it. Right. There's all sorts of research going on about white space and this desire to have open time to be able to converse and talk about whatever one needs to talk about. I mean, you've been near a coffee pot with a couple teachers, and 9 times out of 10, it ends up being like a super rich conversation about their students. But creating that time and allowing that sort of organic growth to happen when you have that time is good too. I mean, we sometimes get caught in the trap of planning everything, pushing everything in a certain direction. But if it's not the direction the teacher needs, then what's the point?
Yeah. Command and control and centralized planning is really, you would have thought in '89, when the Soviet Union fell, that would have been discredited, but continues to be something in our hierarchical, schools that we tend to want to do. And I think my favorite times of personal growth as a teacher have been coming from spaces where I can have some autonomy, I've done after school STEM clubs for several years. We just wrapped up what we called a STEAM studio, and it was a collaboration with our grade 1 through 4 lower division art teacher. And last year in the fall, I did a STEM collaboration with one of our elementary science teachers. But you just don't have as many constraints in an after school kind of context, and
Right.
It's opened up, and we can collaborate, we can try something, and it just and it's together, right? I mean, it's co-teaching, and how often do we get to do that? I mean, I'm very invigorated by that. So there's probably I don't believe there's absolute recipes that are always going to work in every case, because kids are different and teachers, people are different in all cases, but there are some powerful ingredients. And so I think co-teaching and having some autonomy and some space in which you're invited to innovate and try something new, and then blend stuff or bring stuff across curriculum areas, those things are pretty much always good, I think.
Yeah. And one of the things I've been trying to embrace in my personal professional development is I'm calling it micro PD. So this idea of Twitter and listening to a quick blog and things that I'm sort of doing on the side.
Mm-hmm.
I often tweet on the couch when my son's watching cartoons, kind of thing. Like I find time in little spots and I get my PD that way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I've sort of realized for the 5 or 6 years, and I'm trying to push that towards my staff. I mean, what I used to do is I'd find new and interesting things in education and send it to people.
Right.
Right. So this is what's happening. Check it out. And I'm discovering that what I wasn't doing was modeling enough. So I'm trying to switch the way I'm disseminating information. So, for example, screencasting on Google is this great plugin that I think is fantastic and allows you to screencast and create little mini lessons and wonderful flipping classes and that sort of thing. And I wanted to tell teachers about it. So instead of just telling them, I screencasted it. Right.
Yes.
It's
Good.
sort of, it's like a logical thing to do, but not necessarily something I always thought about. And so I've been trying to really purposely present new tools that I see useful with those tools.
Yeah. And I would say
the value of the time.
That's awesome. And we need to give teachers and take ourselves more low stakes opportunities to do that, to be in the digital sandbox and to be able to create and play with and then share. Because it's not very realistic to think that, hey, I'm going to be exposed to this idea or just hear about it, and then suddenly I'm going to be doing it with students the next day. I mean, maybe there's some really cutting edge, innovative if you do the technology adoption curve, some really early adapter teachers that maybe you're going to do that, but the majority of teachers are going to. This was great. Matt Scully, who we video conference with, he's at Providence Day School in Raleigh, North Carolina. He talked about, I'd heard this since graduate school, Vygotsky's, like zone of proximal development or whatever. But he talked about it in the context of comfort. If I am way outside my comfort zone, I'm probably not going to try that. So when it comes to learning something new, trying something new, I really need to have an environment, a culture, a situation where I can feel some comfort, because I may not even try that if I really think my chances of failure are high. So I think trying to create those sorts of spaces for teachers, I've found, summer professional development can be a good time for that, and letting them be students. But because you gotta make it, you gotta create it, you gotta do it. If it doesn't come out your horn, whatever that quote is, you can't live it. So what have you found about Screencastify? I'm pretty interested. Are you guys a Chromebook campus, or what's drawn you to that tool?
So like I say, I'm new to the school, and I've been using Google Tools for probably 5 or 6 years, and a big fan of it. And then the school had not been on it, and we did the flip on my entry.
Oh wow!
so I've got.
Is the success of that rider fail or whatever? Ride with you? Were you bringing that in, or was that brought in before you?
It was one of those situations where it was time. There was a time for a change, like just from an email client point of view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And since I had that background on Google Tools, and they were going to change email client anyway, I was like, let's do it. Let's do Gmail, and that could affect somebody, not at all if they'd like, and it's no problem, but it does bring all these tools to their fingertips, and we can present that as a growth opportunity. So I'm coming in sort of with some background to a school that's absolutely fresh.
Okay.
And I really like what you said about low stakes. I think that is an interesting point of view and super important, because not everything is low stakes. Right. And when you're not in the classroom, sometimes you kind of forget that a little bit. So it's important to sort of be aware of that. And it's gone over quite well. And I think the modeling piece has helped, because then I've had people been able to sort of come back and ask me why I chose to do that, or why I did this, or why I did that. And the thing that I love the most about Screencastify is, well, one, it's darn easy. So simple to do, but that it can be fairly simply archived by the teacher. So if you are tech savvy and you don't want it, you just skip it, right? But like if I'm going to sit into a meeting and explain to you how do you use whatever basic tool, like, and for example, I'm rolling out these emails, so I'm teaching you how to use the basic tools in an email and you already know how to use it. What a waste of your time. But if I send that in a video, then you can choose to disregard it or you can choose to watch it. And because they're easily archived, if you didn't get it the first time, you can watch it again, or you can pause it halfway through or whatever, or you can look at it again in a month. But it kind of really allows a lot more choose your own adventure. And I think that was really appreciated because I had this dichotomy. But of course we do. Like, of course we have a dichotomy where we have teachers who get it and have been using Google on their own for the last 8 years, and they don't even know why I'm talking about it, versus those that have never changed email clients before and don't know what to do with it. So those who get it value and appreciate that I'm not shoving it down their throats in a live version that they have to watch it. Right. So I think it's been, that particular tool has been well received and something I've been using pretty heavily for sure.
Yeah. Well, one thought is it would be good to, and I'm interested for our faculty, I'm a technology director now, to really find out from teachers, what do they prefer? Because we've rolled out a new student information system over the summer. And in fact, today we've just got grade cards for the first trimester that are about to go out. And so we're figuring stuff out, and teachers are going to have to make a couple changes to have things calculate and be ready for the grade card. And we've been making some tutorial videos, but we've also done some basically Google Docs with screenshots and steps. And so I've had feedback both ways from teachers who have liked it. The thing I learned as an undergraduate university instructor when I was getting assignments back from students is I couldn't scan a video the same way I could scan a textual blog post in terms of being able to process it quickly. I mean, I guess now with some podcasts and Audible and stuff, you can speed it up. I think my dad does that. Like, he listens to books like at 1.5 speed. Or
Right.
Unless you gotta like the chipmunk sound, I guess, if you want to do that. But
you're right. The scanning is tough. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that would be, and maybe somebody's done a study. So, hey, if anybody's listening to this is a university person, or maybe I should just Google on Google Scholar. That would be interesting practical research to say, what does the research find teachers, prefer when they're learning a new skill? Is it predominantly one or the other? Is it an equal mix between, I love a video that I can rewind, or, I prefer the text and screenshots that I can scan? I know it's a mix, but I don't know what the balance of percent is on that.
Yeah, I think, and I agree, if we can get some actual research, that'd be great. So before screencast, my preferred choice of delivery of this sort of thing was exactly what you said. So text, picture, and then in the pictures, you'd modify them. So you're circling things in red and putting arrows and things like that. And that was a skill that was brought to me by, for lack of a better word, my school's tech guy, who was doing that quite proficiently. And then I was talking to him about it, and he expressed that. He said from his point of view, as someone who's fairly tech savvy, he doesn't like that he can't read it real quick, right? If it's the images and the text, he can zip through the part that he already knows and key on the part he doesn't know, get that, and move on to the next thing. But that the video is too slow. So I suspect it's a continuum piece, but I wonder where the balance goes. Like, how proficient do you need to be to sort of really not need the video? Because, or at least from my point of view, building the video sort of takes me as long as it takes me to say it and do it. Versus building the piece of visual is a lot more time consuming. But if it's more effective, then we should probably do the one that's more effective.
Well, or probably meet people in different ways. I mean, you can't always, meet every, and I know learning styles are discredited, but just people's preferences. If you've got a learning preference, yeah, that's something that I'll probably need to attend to. The other thought I have about that with, talking about flipped classrooms and screencasting is I'm really passionate about showing with media. So I really want students to show me what they know and have a broad menu of products that they can create to show that, not just, a text-based assessment or a written essay, but, being able to create a 5-photo story or narrate their art or do visual notes or make a paper slide video. There's all these things that they can make. And I think that, that flipping the classroom should at some point at school mean students creating the videos, and doing the teaching. And so that flip
Absolutely.
is not just, hey, I'm the teacher and I'm delivering in a different way, but you're still just consuming, but your role as a student has shifted from maybe a purely consumption role to a production producer.
Absolutely. And I think that all students should have the opportunity. But recently I was having a chat with a teacher about early finishers, like this idea of having people who are done early and what can they do. And, it drives me a little bit nuts when people end up doing worksheets. And why not solidify your concept with teaching it to others? But they're students and not teachers. So yes, there's that benefit of going and teaching a peer one-on-one, but what about just creating that video, right? Creating that instructional video that could then be used for other peers this year and next, right? Like it's a really cool idea.
And another thing to study about that is, what do people like? Because this comes up too with flipped classroom. I just heard somebody the other day say all the videos are created, but I've heard teachers say their students really like to hear their voice. They like them being the one teaching the concept. Yeah, Sal Khan has done, thousands of videos, but that doesn't let us all off the hook to say the best instruction for students is going to be to just put them on Khan Academy and turn them loose.
Right.
And so I think that's a very interesting thing in flipped classroom too. Again, I'm sure there's people doing research on it, but I know that.
Well, there's a ton of nuances there, right? Like if you think of school climate, right? If I'm your teacher, I'm going to know where you're located, who the school is, who should I involve in examples, like all those little nuances that you do when you're teaching, because it's the art of teaching. You're going to make that work in the videos you create. Khan Academy is not.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, that it's having that toolkit. Back to what we were talking about, sort of overwhelm and all the different tools and how do we, stay up and I think that, we've got that's got to be one of the fundamental things we do with our schedule is we find ways to regularly help teachers have time to learn at school, not just to leave it. I mean, I love learning all the time. I probably need to just watch some mindless Netflix and turn off my brain more than I do. But I think that I don't know if that's true in Canada. I think it's definitely true here in Oklahoma where I am, and it's hard to make these sweeping generalizations, but we generally tend to be very class focused, very bell focused, and not very learning for the teacher focused.
Right.
And I would love to be hearing more and seeing more examples of schools that are finding creative ways to do that. Because frankly, we have to survive. I don't know, maybe not. We can probably survive doing what we did last year, but if we're going to really,
I feel like the goal should be higher than survival.
Absolutely. Right. If we're going to thrive.
There you go. There's I was thinking of new and interesting things going on. This might interest you. So have you heard of numberless word problems in math?
I don't think so.
This is brand new to me, and Brian Bushart, as far as I know, is sort of one of the big people pushing this, and we're going to try to have him on the podcast soon. And it was brought to me by Tracy Tinley, who I had on the podcast last week. And it's this idea. I like the idea because it kind of flows in what you were saying of like concepts. And what's neat about these numberless problems is that they teach they're making you look into the concept before you're worried about the computation. So the sort of simple example would be, there were boys on the bus and then some more girls came on the bus.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Right.
And so, okay, well, what do we got here? Well, we've got some boys. Okay. We also have some girls. We have more girls than boys. Yeah. Sounds like we have more girls than boys. Okay. And then what he's done is he's created these slide decks, and then every slide adds a little more. And so slowly they start to build and say, okay, well, there's some boys in the bus and there are more girls in the bus, and how many boys are there in total? And so you're thinking about the operation, like, okay, this is an addition problem. I got to find how many of these, how many of those, I put them together, and then I have the answer. And then the number comes in.
Yeah.
Right. So when you put this whole thing in front of people right away, and this is particularly for math, but I mean, it could be for anything, right? Like when you're getting a great big piece of text in English, you get this whole big thing right away, and then you're expected to dissect it backwards. Why not do it the other way around? Why not present it in the reversed way.
Right. Interesting. I started off teaching life as a fourth grade math teacher. So, I was fortunate, I think, to have a teacher preparation program that talked about manipulatives and, Jerome Bruner and, moving from the concrete eventually to the abstract. And, it was good. It was far more than just, here, present these algorithms. I think math can be one of the easiest content areas to teach poorly, page 20, 1 through, 50 odd, go,
right.
That kind of thing.
Follow the recipe sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I heard somebody just the other day talking about math and how wonderfully creative math is at higher levels, as people grapple with things and they look for simplicity and elegance. And boy, I think a lot of us just don't get there. I mean, a lot of us, do the algorithms and we get through the courses, but we don't get to maybe that level. So that's really interesting to think about getting students to think about the thinking more than just the algorithm and the right answer.
Well, it'd be nice to bring that elegance back. Like, why is it you have to get to X level before you can see the elegance in math? Like,
yeah.
Why is it able to create these algorithms?
It gets back to assessment. I think it's a lot cleaner and easier, to assess cleanly, what's the answer? Did you get it right or wrong? Here's the graph of how my students are doing. And that's, that gets back to the idea of learning and assessment and, what we measure. And, so a lot of times the things that matter the most are not going to be things that are going to lay out so easily on a graph. So, but that's challenging, especially as you work with parents, that are very grade oriented and conditioned kids. Are you all pretty grade focused where you are, or how's the culture of focusing on grades and that?
Well, I mean, it's fluid, right? Some more so than others, but yes, there still is certainly a grade focus. But do you know Star Saxton? You've heard that name?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, so she's doing all sorts of interesting stuff with no grades, and I talked to her a little while ago on the podcast, and I was really surprised about how much it wasn't about no grades. Right? I feel like we're waving around these flags that are, in my opinion, not even presenting what they really are. Like, I think I can understand why a parent might say, "What do you mean? The grades are important. It's important that I have some sort of marker to identify where my child's at." And then somebody else is saying, "Nope, no grades, forget grades, or throwing grades out the window." But then you actually get into the conversation. Like what Star's doing in her classes is these kids are presenting a grade that they think they deserve and then defending it based on a set of information or a body of work they've done throughout the year. So, I mean, how is that not a grade? It sounds like a grade to me. It sounds like a well-defended, supported, thought-out grade. So I'm wondering if that semantics is something that we're kind of getting caught up on, and this feeling that grades mean X number of tests.
Yeah. Well, I think we tend to think of grades as the thing that comes from on high from the teacher, right? It's not this shifting the onus of proof to the student to say, here was the rubric, here was the assignment, convince me what grade you deserve based upon the evidence that you present and, what the criteria was. That's a very different way of presenting grades versus, this is the test I made. This is the score you got. This is, I don't know if there's a curve or not, but I don't know. That what you're describing with STAR is a much different way of approaching assessment than
a completely different way. But I think when it's laid out that way, right, it's a little easier to digest than saying, "I'm not giving you a grade." Right.
Oh yeah. I mean, that in a lot of contexts, that's just going to be too radical. You're going to be dismissed. There's no way we can do that. And on a practical level, we still, we have colleges and universities. I mean, a big role of schools has historically been to sort kids, rank and sort kids.
Right.
We can lament that, but not everybody is going to be able to go to the selective school of their choice. And anyway, there's sort of the status quo world that we live in, and then, the world that we want to transform it into. So I don't know. I think there are more colleges, taking kids who are homeschooled and, have some alternative alternative school situations, and kids can take ACTs here. Do you guys take ACTs and SATs as well for all Canadian university, or do you have your own set of tests for college entrance?
We do not. It is it's based on your grade at the school. So there's not a separate test outside of the grade that you get. Yeah.
Wow. Huh. So how are they trying to make sure that's equitable and similar school to school?
So that's the battle, right? Is that how do you kind of don't,
right? Huh.
Right, and so it's tough. I mean, and there is that question of grade inflation, and we had an issue. Was it 2000 and what year was it? So the province of Ontario in 2004, maybe it's 2003, had a double cohort of students going into university. So we had grade 13. We used to have grade 13, and then they got rid of it. So then we just had grade 12. So for that 1 year, they had two sets of kids going to university. And so in that double cohort year, the competitiveness just went through the roof, right? Because all of a sudden you doubled the number of people going in. And so schools were inflating grades, right? They're inflating grades to get their kids into university. And then that sort of pushed up averages. And it is an interesting challenge. And I think a lot of weight is put on the professionalism of the teacher, and they're qualified professionals, and they're meant to be not inflating grades, but I can understand where there would be skepticism on that, and especially in things like the general arts, right? It's so tough to, like, I say you have an 82 and you say I have an 84 in English,
right?
I mean, okay,
right.
Sure.
Yeah, right.
Like it's pretty hard to get into an argument about that.
Well, one thing that I do see as definitely a bright shining star when it comes to assessment are portfolios. And my wife has been using Seesaw with her students in the classroom.
I've just been exploring Seesaw, possibly bringing that into my grade 5, 6 level.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's huge because for multiple reasons. One is, especially if you're in a one-to-one or a blended environment with devices, we need to facilitate the ease with which students can submit their work to the teacher, right? That shouldn't be a hard thing for you to turn something into me if I'm your teacher. And also for us to interact around the content. And even better, I can privately interact with you and give you feedback. Being able to have the opportunity to share that with the class and then have feedback and moderate that. And there's all kinds of good discussions to have about digital citizenship and comments and kindness and respect and accountability, all kinds of good things like that. I used Seesaw for the first time last summer in the iPad media camps that I lead, which are 3-day workshops for teachers, basically learning how to create, narrated slideshows, quick edit videos, and ebooks on the iPad.
Right.
It was huge. It streamlined the process where the previous 3 years, I was kind of teaching a convoluted workflow of setting up your YouTube channel and then how to do that. And it was hard to do on the iPad, and you did that on the laptop. And then, lots of teachers had never shared on YouTube and sharing publicly. Seesaw's private, so there's a lot of value in it, being inside where we can feel safer. The teacher can share the things outside, but I can't say enough about it. And I'm not affiliated with them or getting a kickback for, singing their praises. But I'll say this, that when my wife sits down at conferences, and I need to find out, because we've got a number of teachers, especially in our lower school, doing Seesaw this year. I mean, for the parent, nothing beats being able to sit down and hear your child and see their work of where they were in August or September and where they are now in November. Right. And I mean, that is assessment. I mean, being able to get that kind of a window, and then as the teacher, having that ease of, okay, well, let's take a look at how Sarah's doing. I really believe it needs to be an important part of our present and future when it comes to assessment. And I'm not saying that it's going to replace grades and that people are going to be able to kick all the grades out, but it sure can become a rich environment for having discussions about student knowledge and skills, which should be a big part of assessment.
Well, and tech allows us to give that in a bunch of different ways. It allows us to give evidence that we couldn't give before. So I had a teacher who was, they were writing stories. It was a grade 5. They're writing stories. And then they were screencasting the child talking about the story and kind of going through and mentioning this and that about why they chose the character's name or whatever. And that right alone, they just captured it. So we as teachers have always done that. We've always taught the kids. We've always heard their opinions, and then maybe we even give a grade to that in our notebook. But when you actually have that artifact, right, and then not only can you pass it on to me as a teacher, but I could easily pass it on to you as a parent. Right? And as a parent, you've got a bank of this, and you've come to the parents' interview, and you've already seen what your child has said about their own work. Like, how rich is that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, my wife has good stories. She doesn't have very many connected parents. All her families are homeless. All the kids are homeless in her class. And so last year,
all the kids in her class are homeless?
Yeah, it's a school for homeless children.
Okay.
So they're a special nonprofit school that is a transition program to really help families get on their feet again and help kids be confident and go back into public school. They're not a permanent solution. So, there's a lot of challenges obviously that they face. And so last year she has usually between 12 and 17 kids. It varies. But she only really last year had one connected parent on Seesaw, which meant that they had a cell phone, that they had put the number in, and they could receive a text message every time something was put into their child's portfolio.
Right.
But she had multiple stories from last year with that parent where she had interaction with the parent around the student work. They went on a field trip fishing and she had taken a picture and before they were back on the bus, the parent had said, "Oh, it's always been his dream to go fishing." Right. I mean, these connections that they made, which without the tech they wouldn't have. I don't know. I mean, those things don't measure up on a grade card, and we're not talking about college entrance, but we are talking about building relationships and having conversations about students and about their work. And that is one of the, again, sometimes people will see technology as this real alienating. Oh my gosh, kids are having their souls sucked out of them. And I think, maybe, I mean, that could be happening, but tech can also really be this powerful tool that allows us to have interactions that we wouldn't have otherwise. That's probably the transformative level of SAMR whatever that model, SAMR.
It's SAMR, you got it.
Yeah. And so I need to be having that roll off my tongue a little bit more, so I sound more conversant about it. But that I get jazzed about that, because a way that we built a bridge, we built a connection, we had a conversation that we didn't have otherwise, and we can say, "Wow, that was great." Look at how the tech it humanized us more. It helped us develop our relationships. And if we know anything about learning, it should be that relationships are hugely important, and that we've got to attend to those and find ways to cultivate those, both with our students and hopefully with parents and our community as well.
Absolutely. I mean, even this conversation is an example of that, right? Quick meet on Twitter, and next thing you know, you're conversing online for 45 minutes. Like, this is, we're not even anywhere near each other. This basically couldn't happen 5 years ago.
Right.
So it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I had I think we're getting near to the end of the time, but I had a question I wanted to pass your way, if that's all right.
Yep.
That I got emailed to me earlier in the week. So I've been opening up the lines of communication with people listening to the podcast and trying to get them to be involved. And one of the questions put out was interesting to me, especially in its wording. And it was, how does the average teacher stay current with all the changes in technology? So I was intrigued by the use of the word average teacher.
Yeah.
I think I know what they're driving at.
Sure. Well, I think not just average, but the vast majority of us feel very overwhelmed and very intimidated by the pace of change and the onslaught of information, and by the challenges that face us with devices and students and all of that. My best answer to that would be to become a more connected educator, and to walk down the road of being connected. And at conferences in the last probably 2 years, I've shared a session, and I like to take the techie words out of it. So I've called it basically, finding and sharing good ideas, or discovering new ideas. That's what I've called it. Because don't we all need to do that? We all need to find new ideas, whether we're teaching math and we're going to do wordless math problems, or we're learning about digital citizenship and needing to find curricula and activities and videos, whatever it is. So I was at a Google Summit this last weekend up in Kansas, outside Wichita, a little town called Mays, Kansas. And in one of the sessions, I'd shared about, well, actually, it was when I was just attending. I wasn't presenting. We ended up, I asked about Twitter because the woman wanted to know about text-to-speech tools because her kids, she needed tools that would read web pages,
Sure.
and read text. I said, well, I know my wife has played with several of those. Are you on Twitter? Can you share that? And we ended up, she tried to log in, didn't know her username and password. And then she said, what, is Twitter that big of a deal? And I said, Twitter is the number one tool of every tool I've ever used that I use on a daily basis to interact and learn with other teachers all over the planet. And she was like, my kid said it's just for, I don't know what she said, but it was something silly. And I said, well, they may be using it for that kind of a purpose, but there's a growing number of educators around the world who have found it to be an incredibly powerful tool, an empowering tool. So
I'm told education is the biggest profession on Twitter right now, apparently.
Really? Huh. Mm-hmm. Well, using Twitter and then Flipboard, a question I was going to throw to you, which is kind of in this general area, like everybody needs an information trap. Everyone needs a place where you get a piece of information, and you throw it over there so you can find it later. And so Flipboard has been one place that I have used for that. My wife uses that a lot with magazines that she curates. I honestly use Twitter for that a lot because I archive my tweets and have a way I can search through them. But right. I think we're in terms of staying somewhat current and just being able to be up to date. It's not about subscribing to CNN or Fox News or whatever news you want to read. I mean, you can get mainstream media news, and I'm not saying we turn that off, but using tools that help us filter the information and channel it so that, for instance, with STEM, and when I'm interested in learning more about STEM or even going outdoors, I need to be more active in my life and be, active outside and encouraging our kids to do that. I mean, I have a list on Twitter that I maintain of some folks who are really focused on that, and I can look at that in Flipboard right. and be able to get that kind of content. It's like a channel. So I think that seeking ways to become more connected and to use these tools to not only make connections, but then where do I save that information? And it's going to look different for different people, but everybody needs an information trap, and everyone can benefit from becoming connected and using tools that help us find our tribe. And we'll have different hats that we'll put on, right? I mean, I'm not always putting on the educational technology hat. There's other right. things I'm interested and passionate about, but that's the whole idea of the long tail is that, with technology, we have an opportunity to connect with a small subgroup that we might not normally have been able to connect with, that has shopping analogies, but it also has analogies, I think, in finding like-minded folks. And there's negative sides to that, right? There's the outliers. There's we saw about quite a bit of it in the election in the States, as far as this vitriolic negativity and hatred and all kinds of things that came out. Yes, that's true. Groups can use this to promote hate speech, but at the same time, we can use it to do amazing sharing and collaboration. And so I think that would be the way I would encourage teachers to do that. But right. I don't think the average quote unquote teacher is really doing that today. I think there's more folks using social media, but not necessarily in that kind of a professional learning way. But hey, podcasts are having a renaissance, and if the Google Assistant makes it easier for folks to listen to podcasts, then maybe that'll just expand the number of folks that are in the conversations.
One of the complaints I've had about Twitter is that it's tough to dip your toe in. Mm-hmm. Let's just say you listen to this and you're like, oh, great, Twitter's awesome, and I make an account and nobody follows me. And I try to follow your advice and I ask questions to Twitter and no one answers because it goes out into the ether and I have 0 followers or I have 10 followers. Sure. and it doesn't work. Like it takes that tool is amazing. I use it all the time, but it takes some time. It takes some time to build up a little bit of a network of people that you start to learn about hashtags and figure out where. That was a big one for me, was figuring out hashtags and figure out where these groups of people were sort of hanging out in the world. Right. And then from there, get a few followers. And, since you go over that 1,000 hump, you start to get people answering questions and getting involved with you. And it makes sense, but it's not a quick burn. Mm-hmm. It's really not. Where I think something like a podcast, is a bit faster. Like if what you want is a piece of information now and you want to kind of dip your toe into technology in the professional development world, it seems like a pretty good way to do it. Though I would still really encourage people to use Twitter. It's something I lean on really heavily, even to support other things that I do, right? Like I see it as a really good way to get a very broad, shallow understanding of a lot of things. And I like your idea of information trap, right? That's where I go when I want to see what's out there. And then when I can take little things that I think are excellent and then dig deeper into those, right? Whether it be watching YouTube videos or reading web pages or whatever. But that's where I prospect my information is Twitter.
Yeah. And shout out to Jason Neiffer, who from Montana had the information trap, like the bear trap. That's where I first heard that metaphor. Yeah, but I think that's important. And don't we live in just an incredible day, because the access that we have is unprecedented, yet we feel overwhelmed by it. Yet we're seeing the spread of fake news and people just reading headlines and skimming things. And this all speaks to digital literacy and back to this idea of when do you sharpen the saw and how do you find time to sit down with people. Ed camps have been an important part of my learning in the last few years. And I think that's a place where newbies to Twitter specifically have been able to find some time for people to sit down next to them and say, here, let's figure this out. Let's, what did you do as you started to learn with Twitter? Who did you follow and what's a hashtag and those kind of things? Are you all having Ed camps up in Ontario?
Yep, absolutely. We got Ottawa Ed Camp that's gone a couple times now, and there's a couple other ones going on. Yeah, it's a great thing.
It's something that I think that in Oklahoma, I can say this pretty confidently, that the majority of teachers don't know about. You're not going to get everybody on a Saturday to give up a Saturday morning and go to a professional learning event. But but that's also kind of part of the secret sauce of it. The people who do come are going to be, making that sacrifice because of their interest in learning. And so those have been fruitful, and we've had ours at the end of February or the beginning of March, and that'll be the first Saturday in March for the Oklahoma City area. So I'm pretty excited about that and looking forward to that, because it's always a really good time of connecting, and things are kind of depressing. We're like 50th in the nation now in teacher salaries. So
really,
yeah, we're now
just to be happening with you.
We're below Mississippi and Arkansas. So there's some things that are kind of not so great going on with education. But at the same time, there's also, there's kids to teach, and there's lessons to teach. So hey, look at that! You got the family joining.
Yeah. I've got someone here that's supposed to be in bed. I was giving him the shh, not you.
That's okay. No, I caught that. So.
All right. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Keep doing the podcast. I'm glad to see you doing it, and the conversations will continue, I'm sure.
Fantastic. Thanks so much.